Hey everybody, it's Kelvin time. That's right, the long-awaited sequel to The Forest, Sons of the Forest, is finally out on EA. Sons of the Forest was originally going to come out... I honestly forgot at this point. I think it got delayed, and then later this year, Endnight was like, the heck with it. Let's just drop it into early access so people get a chance to play it like we did with the first game, and here we are. Should you check out Sons of the Forest? Well, I'll let you decide that for yourself by the end of this video. In the meantime, this is your reminder to buy and play Control-Alt-Ego. I am no longer saying this as merely a suggestion. So what even is Sons of the Forest? I hear you say, despite clicking on a video of a highly trending gaming topic with a beloved meme character on the thumbnail? Well, Sons of the Forest is a sequel to a game called The Forest, made by a developer named Endnight. Once upon a time, Endnight was called something else, and they made a game called Endnight, but they renamed themselves to Endnight after that game released. And then, for their next game, they tried this cool new experimental thing called Early Access. That game was called The Forest, and it was very popular. By Early Access, I mean this was as early access as you could possibly get. The Forest dropped on version 0.01, which only had the core gameplay, and then Endnight steadily added stuff to it bit by bit until it was a huge, expansive game with all sorts of stuff and a proper story in it. The Forest was the early access game for a while. There was very little in the way for a better example of a developer putting out something that was promising and then steadily giving us more and more as we gave them a chance to truly build it into something amazing. So after this weekend, I'm about 12 hours, give or take, into Sons of the Forest, which is already enough for me to have one restart in the game. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. As for its condition, well, like the first one, it's early access, but I'd have to say a million times better than the starting point of the original Forest. Like, the first game was so EA that while the developers did put the flare gun in it as like a secret for you to find, not only did it not have an ammo system yet, but it also didn't have a reload animation, meaning that you got an infinite ammo instant kill weapon that fired as fast as you could pull the trigger. This is not the case in Sons of the Forest. Sons of the Forest is a hard, unforgiving game with very little in the terms of jank that you can meaningfully exploit. Yeah, I've seen that one fall damage trick floating around the internet, which funnily enough was a thing you could sort of do in the original game if you had friends, but unless maybe you're speedrunning in a very specific set of circumstances, that's not nearly as useful as it was in the first game, where negating fall damage could allow you to get right to the bottom of the big sinkhole in the middle of the map and skip most of the mid-game. Sons of the Forest is a little tighter than that. Welcome back to The Forest, although this time it's a different forest and we're different dudes, I think. So in the last game, we were the in-world equivalent of Les Stroud and one of the two survivors of a plane crash, the other being Timmy. Some dude steals Timmy though, and you gotta get on that. Can't be letting random dudes swipe your kids. Without spoiling too much, after encountering some mutants, you find some pretty wild stuff going on deep below the forest and eventually make it home. In one of the endings. The Forest was one of the best survival/homesteading games out there at the time, and it's easy to forget that back then there weren't very many of those. It was kind of a maverick of its time. Yeah, we had stuff like Minecraft and a few other things, but The Forest was what was that, 2015? God, I'm getting old. I am realizing I am mortal. Let's put that existential thought away for later. So, before we get into the Sons of the Forest premise, I will say that it's quite refreshing to see a game, early access or otherwise, that is decently optimized on launch. I've honestly lost count of how many games are launching with massive stuttering issues and are over-reliant on DLSS as a crutch for whatever wizardry goes into making a game run smoothly. While I can certainly hear my card getting under load when I play the game, I didn't experience a single noticeable frame drop, and there is a lot of stuff going on in certain points of this game. I will say, however, that things off in the distance do get a bit blurry, but I'm gonna call that as emulation of natural vision, as you can still see objects moving from quite a long ways away. It's also worth noting that while immediately not available on launch, within a day or so of the game going live, there were already recommended settings for your GPU on NVIDIA GeForce Experience, and using them on my machine cranked things all the way up, and I did not see any hits in performance there. Take all this with a big grain of salt though, as this is big, works fine on my machine, energy, and I'm packing an RTX 3090. That being said, there are a not insignificant amount of games that still have trouble with my machine because all the horsepower in the world means nothing if the thing you're trying to run is horribly optimized. Also, the game is spooky, like good spooky. None of this, oh no, the brightly colored monster is gonna jump scare you and then you go back to menu crap, but genuinely the, oh my god, I am running through a pitch dark forest, I have no idea where I am, I have no idea where I'm going, all I know is that they are after me because they let out shrieks to tell the others where I am. There's nothing quite like that. You know they're out there, and that they've got you severely outmatched. They know the area. They have the numbers. They want you dead. And like, this is before you encounter any of the creepy mutants or see any of the particularly nasty stuff down in the caves. This is just the warm-up. Sons of the Forest starts with you aboard a helicopter with a few tactical dudes, as you are a tactical dude yourself. You're going down into a heavily forested area in search of your boss and his family who went missing somewhere around here. He's the CEO of Puff Corp, which is at least big enough to have an entire squadron of in-house PMC guys, which includes you, Fisheye, and Kelvin. Some of the trackers on Mr. Puff and his gear are still working, but just because a tracker is active does not mean the thing connected to it is. But then, oh no, your chopper goes down and you're dumped into a snowy mountainside. As a side note here, if there are multiple starting places planned for Sons of the Forest, I'm not sure if they're in the game yet, as I restarted several times and always ended up right here. Who knows, maybe they're planning on just one starting point though, because the way they've set up the side of this mountain is actually a really nice tutorial that also, by the nature of its environment and how sparse materials are, encourages you to get out there and find like a proper base. Oh, and addendum, as I am writing this, I double-checked the wiki, which is surprisingly well populated for a game that's been out for less than a week as I write this, and yes, there are indeed multiple starts. Just through some strange fluke of luck, I got the mountain start 3 times in a row. Go figure. Alright, so we're mostly on our own now and we need to survive. Good thing we have our handy dandy notebook and an all-purpose axe. Now, I don't know for certain, but this new forest at the very least feels much, much larger than the old one. And I can tell you for certain that it is more hostile than the last one. While I haven't been able to find any solid numerical data on how the escalation of hostilities between the locals and you works, you'll find that the local homeowners association will find you pretty fast and things will escalate very quickly compared to the last game. For reference, during my playthrough of the first Forest game that I did for the video, it took all of 11 days and change to have a single violent encounter with the locals. Like, that's how long it took for them to find me, and by the time they found me, they saw all the trees I cut down, and that I essentially had leveled a part of the island, and it was instant combat. In Sons of the Forest, they almost always find you by day 2 at the latest. Like, based on my own starts, they will come at you by the first night. Now, the next thing after the sheer size and optimization of the forest that's been overhauled is the building system. It's much more modular now and theoretically gives you more wiggle room when it comes to making your own thing, but at least for now, I find it a bit on the tedious side. How so? Well, for starters, I've checked and double checked, and so far, I cannot find any fine angle controls when setting up walls. Maybe I'm just a big fat dummy pants, but for the life of me, I can only build walls at 90-degree angles. Things like spikes and roofing are modular now too, meaning you have the option to reinforce things where you see fit, or even build ramps up to the top of your walls for easy, like, mounting, and that also gives you more wiggle room in setting up your defenses. Are you building these spikes in a rush? Well, they don't need the supporting rocks. Got some time on your hands? Kelvin can hunt up some extra rocks for you and make sure those defensive spikes last. Now, don't you worry, those prefabs from the first game are still around if you want simple and efficient things, and they require more than just logs now, meaning there are normal logs, half logs, quarter logs, three-quarter logs, and planks, which are logs that are split right down the middle. And all those other like solid things that you can find, like the sticks, the rocks, even some animal hides, but don't sweat any of this though. You can prefab your pieces if you really want to, but just coming over to a structure with a normal log in hand and adding them to the building in progress will automatically split them in the most efficient way possible for whatever you're needing to add to it. Say you bring a single log to a structure that needs planks, you'll add 2 planks with 1 log because planks like come from a log. You get what I mean. The game doesn't play with your time here. But who cares about all that? We're not here for building mechanics because if we wanted to, we could do them in Valheim, Minecraft, Fallout 4, Kenshi, and a million other games I'm forgetting about right now. Or even better yet, we can just go outside and build some stuff in a yard. What's really exciting with the new things in Sons of the Forest is that you get AI buddies in single player, in case you have no friends like I do. Meet Kelvin. He was one of your squad mates, but now he's your new best friend. Kelvin got a little boo-boo on his head, but he can still understand basic instructions through writing. That makes him a perfect little cinnamon roll. You have your little notepad and an extremely resilient pen, which you use to give him instructions. Kelvin can do a whole lot of stuff. He can collect just about anything you need for buildings, provided there's a renewable resource like rocks, sticks, or logs, and he can even bring them to containers you've made if you don't want to have them delivered directly to you or a designated spot. Kelvin's a smart boy like that. Kelvin can even help you build structures, most of the time. He's trying his best, okay? On a side note here, I forget if they were like this in the last game, but it would seem that nearly any damage to an in-progress structure causes it to instantly fall apart. But Kelvin can also gather food, and he's pretty good at it. Just telling Kelvin to go get some fish will have you with a couple full drying racks by the end of the day, no problem. And if you're feeling confident in our little guy, you can also have Kelvin work to essentially clear out an entire area of your choosing. Just be careful leaving him alone though. I'm fairly certain that the rules of when it comes to deforestation are still in play from the last game, and clearing everything for 20 meters around him is a good way to get the HOA coming after poor Kelvin. There are, however, things that Kelvin can't presently do. Despite being able to use an axe to cut trees, as far as I can tell, he's incapable of violence. He will point out enemies creeping in the tree line so long as he has a line of sight, but all he can do if they're on him is either run away or cower. Kelvin can be downed, and he can straight up die. I am officially classifying Kelvin as a beep tier NPC, which means that if Kelvin goes down, it's time to roll back the save. No real leader lets their people die for them. I'm going down before either Kelvin or Leggy goes down, because if I just run away and let them die, I didn't deserve them in the first place. Kelvin also has trouble pathfinding sometimes, especially around custom structures like the edges of walls near water or ramps. Poor little guy was walking into that wall for hours. On a side note here, it would be pretty nice if I could build like a little bit into the water, like to make sure I have complete walls. Like I wouldn't mind if, say, I had to continually replace the logs because like they'd start to rot. Just like, you're putting holes in my defenses here with your building limitations. Despite the pathing issues, Kelvin seems to have no problem avoiding traps and building basic things out in the woods. Maybe if we figure out how to blueprint for custom stuff, Kelvin might be able to path around them better. Then we have Virginia, who is not only one of the people you're looking for, but whose name is possibly a reference to one of the creepy mutants from the last game. I call her Lil Leggy. Lil Leggy isn't like Kelvin. You don't have her loyalty right off the bat. If anything, while she's curious about your presence, she is extremely skittish. Poor girl's at that point in her life where she wants to try talking to boys, but doesn't exactly know how to do that yet. Don't worry, kiddo. Kelvin's a nice boy that will respect you and take interest in the things you eventually are strong enough to talk to him about. Real genuine advice for any of the myriad of you that are watching this video and just now getting into the dating world after 2 or 3 years of isolation, it's best practice to stop thinking about girls, boys, or whomever as just girls or boys. Every person out there is a unique individual with their own wants, desires, and needs, which are all influenced by the events of their life that are irreplicable. Is that a word? There is no secret to girls or boys or anyone else. It's all just people who have their own likes and interests, just like you do. And when you better understand that, you can make better connections with people, including the ones you're attracted to. As for the whole working up to talk to people thing, well, stuff like Toastmasters or joining a group where you'll be talking to new people, like volunteering to read for folks or public radio, is great for working up that nerve. Just be open about how you're trying to get better about talking to people, and most of the administrators of those groups will totally understand. Oh, and by the way, once she likes you enough, Leggy can equip multiple guns and waste baddies for you. Unlike Kelvin, Leggy is extremely capable of violence. So what will we be doing all this violence on? The mutants. The mutants in Sons of the Forest are very similar on a surface level to all the nasty folks you encountered in the last game, but there is one key difference. They wear clothing. Yes, if you look closely at all the dudes trying to kill you, you'll notice that they indeed have shirts and pants on. Some are even wearing dresses. These locals have a different origin than the guys from the last game, and if you know, don't tell. We're barely a week past EA's launch, so while people have completed the game as I write this, not everyone is ready for spoilers yet. Also, holy crap, people completed a survival exploration game meant to be completed over the course of dozens if not hundreds of hours in the span of a couple days. Like I mentioned earlier, The locals around here are much more aggressive than the ones from the first game. Not only do they find you faster, but escalation happens faster too. Not only did I find myself being forced into fights as early as the first night as the mutants went straight for destroying my camp, but the mutants also escalated much faster than in the forest. Before I had even made it to the first week, mutants were already coming at me decked out in creepy armor from the last game in big murder squads. Also, on top of the creepy mutants, which I believe are still timer locked like the last game, there are now much larger variants of the basic mutants, including a tribal chief guy that can essentially one-shot you, if not two-shot you, and is so damn big you can't carry his body and have to make a fire underneath him to get rid of the body. What do you get in exchange for this rapid escalation of hostilities between you and the Homeowners Association? Prize pouches. About half the mutants you kill will drop a skin pouch, which looks a lot like a fleshy version of the thing you opened up at the beginning of the game, which will give you hard to find items like duct tape, which you need to make bone armor now. Come to think of it, I think my bone containers filled up way faster than they did back in the first game, and oh boy, do they like sending waves of dudes in this version of the game. I think this might have had something to do with how my first settlement away from the initial landing site was most likely near a high traffic area and was definitely near a village, but I still saw way more dudes than I ever would have in the forest. At least that means I get a lot of prize pouches. Another new, or perhaps I should say so heavily upgraded it may as well be new thing, is your map. Before, you had a piece of paper that the player character hand drew as he explored. Now, you've got a whole stinking GPS tracker system that not only tells you where you are, but also where the caves are, or important points of interest on the map, like where Kelvin is at all times. Crazy stuff like that. The old map did have cave entrances on them, but they were so hard to read that you were frankly better off just using markers to find caves for later. The GPS also lets you zoom in on stuff and see places you haven't been yet, and frankly, it almost feels like cheating. Like sure, this is probably a case of, we know you're all just gonna go look at interactive maps online anyway, so we gave this to you, but sometimes it takes the spookiness out of exploring if I'm able to plot out where exactly I want to look around before I strike out. There is the limiting factor that you can now only have a limited amount of trackers thanks to needing a GPS thingy, but it just makes me ask, why can't I just manually mark things on the map like I could in like pretty much any other GPS map out there, or a GPS application? I think that's just splitting hairs at this point though. It's still worth noting that even if this all is very well polished early access, it's still an early access game and they're still adding things and squashing bugs over at Endnight. Heck, they just added hotkeys earlier this week. There are some glitches that can be found, like the fall damage thing, or sometimes things will get a little iffy with the menus and you won't be able to interact with things. But usually those things will right themselves after saving and reloading. What is rather frustrating though is that loose stuff resets between loads, such as if Kelvin did a little oopsie and chopped on your treehouse causing all the planks to fall off it, you will have a glitch and you'll need to reload because like the game gets a little overwhelmed. And then when you do reload, all the materials that fell to the floor will be deleted, so now you gotta go out further and get more stuff. This works both ways though. If you really want to cheese the game, you can set up your base near the starting helicopter intentionally, or somewhere where they've got a lot of containers, and all containers on the ground will reset after each boot up, meaning that you can near indefinitely farm them by saving and reloading. The other thing that's gonna need hammering out between adding whatever isn't in the game yet is the balance. Now, I'm a vet of survival games, and I've made it through the first forest no problem. But Sons of the Forest is kicking the crap out of me so hard that early on, I ended up having to abandon my first save because I realized I was in a situation so close to unwinnable that it wasn't worth the effort to fight through, considering how early on in the game I was. The way aggression ramps up, combined with how if you do naturally regenerate health in Sons of the Forest, it's very, very slow to the point of you won't be able to notice it, and then combining that with how there are enemies so early on that can and will two-shot you, and you'll find that you are very fragile. Now, there is an in-game stat of strength, which will supposedly increase your tankiness as you level it up as you do more things like build stuff, pick up wood, etc. But with at least the first 10 levels, it's unnoticeable. In the previous game, you'd go black and white for a bit before going down, and you could regen out of it so long as you dodged for a good 30 seconds or so, allowing you to hold on in more protracted fights with lots of dudes. But ironically, when compared to the guy that was a survivalist first and a fighter second, the guy who is a fighter first and a survivalist second goes down like a sack of potatoes. This wouldn't be too bad, except for how, like in the first game, you get one non-story knockdown, and then when you do, you get carted off to the nearest village. However, unlike the first game, your stuff is now much farther away from you and you need to recollect it, and now there are a bunch of people in the village you get taken to. Part of the reason why I gave up on my first save was that I kept getting knocked down, transported to a village where I had like hardly any health and no gear, and then I'd get game overed within a minute of trying to escape, because as soon as I broke free, they were all on top of me and I had no gear. It might be prudent to bring back empty villages for your first down, because otherwise they just kill me outright when I go down the first time, and you know what, just don't waste my time with that crap. Just make it an instant game over. Maybe this was perhaps more balanced around the multiplayer experience, where you'd have friends to revive you and do crowd controls on the larger groups of mutants that bum rush you within a week of spawning in. As it is though, I had to swallow my pride, go into the custom difficulty settings, and essentially making everything the same as normal difficulty, except setting the aggression of the locals to low in order to give me a fighting chance to establish myself. Maybe after some time, I'll be able to do it on default settings again once I really learn this map and learn where's a good hiding spot, like, you know, safe and far away from villages, and how to best manage my early game resources in this version of the forest. But for now, I ended up running around for a long time and finding that essentially every place that would be a good fit for your base already had a village on top of it. This might just be something that comes with time though, as I found a nice spot by a place I'm calling Moose Lake. My moose friends don't mind the rapid industrialization, and I think the Homeowners Association fears the moose. So in closing, I'd say that this is a scenario where I'm personally having an okay time because I really like the forest, and so far Sons of the Forest is essentially more of that. I don't want to be so snarky as to say it's like the Forest 1.5, but I'm not going to give it a hard recommendation for or against buying it as it stands because this is early access. I trust you all to make an informed decision on this based on your own likes. This won't be the last of Sons of the Forest we see on this channel. I'll come back to it later in the year when the game is fully out and give it a proper video once all the dust has settled and we really have time to get into things like lore and finer mechanics. We're just gonna have to leave it on these initial impressions. So thank you all for watching. If you'd be so kind, please consider liking the video and leaving a comment, as that does help me out a lot. Also, an enormous thank you to all the saucy ones over at patreon.com/charlatanwonder who make these videos possible. Be sure to check out my Patreon, where all pledges get early access to videos, and everyone at the $5 tier and up gets full recipes for the cooking segments. I know we didn't have one this video, but we're gonna go big soon. If you can't or won't, that's totally cool. I'm still thankful that you took your time to watch this, and I really hope to see you in the next one. Now, one last reminder before we sign off. Remember that no matter what you do, be it dancing, playing music, drawing, making videos like I do, you do not make content. You make art. Don't let any suit or pedestrian try to minimize what you do down to content, because content is a colorless slop meant to placate uncaring masses. What you do has inspiration, direction, and is irrevocably you by the means of its very creation. Your art has value, and it is far beyond anything the concept or even the word content can encompass. So go. Draw that thing, bake those little pastries and post them on the internet. Do long plays of old games almost everyone has forgotten about. So long as you do it, your art is worth fighting for. So say no to content, and stay saucy, everyone. We have made a trade. I have finally gotten my pillow back for my back support, but now Frisk has my bathrobe. He seems to be into it. But I will need that back eventually, Floofel, as I will need to take a bath at some point. It's ironic. It's like he only wants to sit on things that have the smells or a cardboard box. And then we get him designated sitting things like the scratcher there that got pushed under. And this thing, which was a Christmas gift from my own mother. It's a dummy laptop designed for cats to sit on. Let me... Oh God, my legs hurt. It was a day at the gym. But yeah, it's a completely fake laptop. It does have a power button here because you can like plug it in and it'll act like a heater. I don't know how I feel about that. And instead of Windows, it has cat having a sit. You know, you're just gonna be, do some work. Do a business, Frisk. get some work done. Have yourself a proper, productive day. Send some emails. Make some invoices. Send out quotes. I don't know. I don't know what to do with this boy. I try to find more interesting places to put him for y'all, but he just really likes sitting here at the bottom of like my storage shelves where I keep like all my extra camera wires and a few like tools that I use a lot that are like too frequently used to be shut up in the toolbox. But this boy, he just insists on sitting right here. Not even at the windowsill, just right here. You gonna send an email or what? He's just not having it. I can't make this boy do anything. I'm gonna feel so silly when I get one of those cat wheels and you never touch it.